So a topic that came in the last couple of weeks was this, again and again in different forms, was this issue of representation in the kind of widest sense that, okay, like what is a form of a representation that creates an engagement and resonance towards the interaction itself, and like builds understanding, but also makes it clear, like or supports how the question of how to interact with something. And of course, we have and should have this sort of more normal tools, which is text and maybe normal diagrams, etc. But also we visited along our sessions different other approaches, maps, etc. But I thought it might be interesting to play around with this, like take the representation to be the let's say the main topic or the main emphasis of how to represent structure. Like, for example, you could take the idea of a scene, which the structure of the scene, and then and like make, what if it was represented this way or that way? And I chose the mirror board. Like, there are other options, but like mostly because it combines both like rudimentary drawing, which still works, plus with this sort of diagrammatic possibilities, text and connections, etc. So so that's the kind of general thematic direction. How does that sound for everybody? Like, and meanwhile, I will give Martin the link because he might not see the.
I just gave it.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Well, the link. Thank you. I saw it.
Yeah. But yes, how does that sound for everyone as a direction? Also, if there are questions, etc.
I missed the intro, but I think I just step on board with what you guys will be doing.
All right. No questions, no comments. Come on. Probably I was too general again. That's what happens when you're trying to do technical stuff while talking. But so, like, how we could start this essentially is to take, let's say, a premise, like whether that's if you look at the right side of the map, there are these sort of like, of course, these sort of basic graph-like structures, nodes and edges, connections. Then there is, of course, the technique of nesting, like it's kind of the second memento, like having things inside other things, etc. But also, like, as a practical example from the last couple of weeks, the flowchart, which is of course still a graph, but has a different kind of emphasis. Like, this came in the case of, like, if you would map an organizational structure, it might look like a graph, like a mind map. But then if you map a role, you might also want to draw a flowchart of it. Like here's a role, the lines are different moves / rights that they can do. These lead to operations that they create, and those lead to other things again. And then I think it's quite quickly immediate that you like, if you have a diagram of an organization, and then you have on the side, for example, these sort of flowcharts, it's probably a much more enhanced representation or for understanding, but also
for understanding, it could be good that you share the screen also, so for the recording it's better.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is a good point. So I'll just
maybe it's easier.
do that. Yeah. Once I get to my Zoom controls, all right. Let's do that. All right. So, and then couple of other examples I had is grid structures, which is of course an example of nesting, but grid can also have this sort of different kind of area definition. You know, everything that is on the left side is under a certain theme, or everything that is on the right side is under a certain theme. And inside the grid, you could have nesting structures or graphs. This is another possibility. But then I also put just generally maps, and I chose a kind of a dungeon map mostly because it's kind of in between. It's a hybrid of something that is from the real world, but has a very much like graph-like presentation. I could have also had like just an image or image of a map, but I think we can use our minds for those, because those are also representations. And of course, then there's always text itself, and text formatted in this into these various forms. So that's a kind of a range of mementos for these topics. Is there anything that should be added, or not even just as these choices, but some other structuring things that you could think of off the top of your head?
So I'm reading currently, like in a bit more depth, the series of articles around the semantic spacetime, where part of it is actually about capturing like semantic structures and processes through graphs. And what I found pretty interesting was how he is decomposing kind of all the possible relations into 4 like elemental categories, which is I don't know, perhaps this is not the time to go to the detail, but what I liked was that actually every graph or like every kind of graph and kind of the depiction of processes or structures. So he's like showing how those 4 types of relations can be kind of the low-level composing elements, and I find it pretty interesting. So perhaps that could be, actually, I think I will take this topic to the next currency playground session. That will be a better place.
Yeah, it's a good topic. I thought there's kind of like bottom-up view of this, like the Lego blocky view, and in some ways we have visited that level. I've been reading the same articles. I think I'm now up to 6, and kind of looking at that view. There is like the level we've been, like one can go down. Like the last time when we're talking about token attributes towards the end, that's also a way to go down into these Lego blocks. But then there is also a way to go up, like way to go towards the let's say the interface of people, and both are important. Like I think, for example, the one thing that the last time showed, like when I did this sort of rather, I thought, rudimentary graph of some of the interaction structures that were essentially kind of talked through in the first session, it clearly helped with understanding, and that was a way of going up in a way. I thought one approach here could be like thinking of this going up. What is the user interface, and how do different user interfaces play for our or what kind of almost game mechanics the different user interfaces can be. That's a thought I had. But I mean, we can go up and down, like depending on where we go. But that was the proposed starting point. Like, what do people see essentially? Any other additions? Any comments on the particular forms? What are they good at? What is a map good for? Traditional map? How does it differ from the say a diagram?
Yeah, this that you have here, they seem to kind of be suggesting, as you said, like some sort of like user interface elements, or as well like elements of a board of a game, and so on. So I find it very interesting, while at the same time they are kind of you can assemble and disassemble and play with these different like Lego blocks. So I find it interesting, and as you said as well, like what if this is the level of kind of interface, what sort of like databases and data structures and so on they start to kind of suggest. So it's very what kind of information do they start to suggest. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, there is almost like I was thinking of like including something from board games, but then like that was so large an area that I like would have been like several images in itself. And I thought like it's almost like a topic on the side, like to have a board game structure. But the one thing I'll start sketching here, like to think about these structures, is so even in a, let's say, a normal graph, I can delete this later because this is more documentary, like which we don't have the meaning yet, but we can even make a meaning for it if we want. Something like this. If you add tokens here, like now to the user interface, it changes the nature. Like you think of any graph, but suddenly if it's graph with tokens, which you can move, the interaction is changed, but also that changes the understanding. Like let's say this is a grid. Just checking everyone is seeing the screen and updating. So if you have this, say, the first token is a round and another one is a triangle, that's messy, but I think it works. But if your interaction is now that I move the triangle here from here, you're changing the nature of the diagram in itself, which would be the same for every one of these forms. Like if we take the, let's say the flowchart, same thing. The flowchart actually would then start to suggest something like tracking process or time, which is I think one of its strengths. Like if we have something like this, which is more flowcharty in nature, where these kind of things can immediately point out the choices. If somebody has a marker token here and moves it here, it's a form indicative of like changing faces almost. Not that it has to, but it's probably one of its strengths. And this
you can faces or
faces,
F.
like in a sequence.
Yeah.
Like, and this you can see in many board games. I wish I had like images on call, but like you could have like you have many board games that have a tracking mechanism, and the tracking can be slightly branching. So therefore, it's really like a flowchart. And then you have a token that is like a general tracker, but then you might have several different tokens to track different issues. But what you're using that is kind of like seeing where different processes are. Whereas if you have a field, like a graph, it's more about positioning and configuring, like I'm moving my player token here versus here, and therefore I can do these kind of things. So they even though they're somewhat similar, they still do different things or have different strengths. And of course, in a map, it's even harder. It's or even more concrete in the sense of I'm moving around in a map. Like I'm now here, this, and then I will walk here. But it's kind of like a those scribbles are so awful that I will remove them, but I added them to the map. But you get the point. So what I'm starting in the start, this is precisely the kind of possibility space and kind of question space I want to open. Is like how like to first see these different strengths and what kind of processes they point out to. Just like the say the flowchart points to not necessarily time, but something like time, like a process that has a sequence, whereas the map points to more something more spatial, and a normal diagram points to maybe a spatialized process, and then like the lines in a graph point to conditions in the process, like what do I need to cross this from this point to that point, etc. And then, of course, the tokens, as an example, of suddenly kind of opening up the space of play in that, which I think is an interesting quality, that you can think of a normal diagram and then you think, let's add tokens to that, and suddenly everything is in a different kind of interaction space. So these kind of things I wanted to open up in the beginning to come to this space of thinking about playing with diagrams and similar forms. Does that make sense? Does it open any thoughts?
I find it interesting that by kind of making this like very very small, very minimal moves, like you can actually express a lot. So kind of I find it very interesting to be kind of that you were like presenting this in a very like minimalistic level. It's much easier to think about the kind of larger structures when you kind of know the affordances of this like basic kind of building blocks or so on. So I think this will be very interesting to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, one more aspect I wanted to point is also, like, whether you have a map or a diagram or really any of these forms, there's always this like possibility of nesting. So an easy example which I'm trying to scribble here is like, say one area has essentially a kind of link or reference of some kind, and that points to a text. So if we use, for example, the dungeon map like case, this is almost the norm, is that there is a text on the side which is like has references to the space, often something like A1 or whatever, a symbol, but then you have a text on the side that describes that. I mean, normally it's a description of this, what's the room like, that it has water dripping in and things like this, but it can also have like start of a process, like there is some creature there, and therefore there is a point of interaction, like do you start talking to the creature, etc. And this kind of takes place in this sort of nested space of a diagram. But of course, this is a larger quality, like in a way there is a similarity if you have just a normal graph and then you have like a title in the graph, but then there is a text on the side that has a deeper text on that title. Or you have a title on the connection edge and you have a text connected to that. And that's of course, all of these are kind of elementary qualities, but then you can start combining them. Like, what if you have a text, but the text has kind of its own areas, like you have a text connected to some point in the graph or a map, but then you can place a token into a certain text and it becomes locational again. Like token representing you, but also token representing your interest. Like let's say you have to use this dungeon map example still because it's simple. Like if there is a text and there, let's say to that room, and that has like, I should use text tool here, but like a description, I'll just put D, and you place your token into the description, and that means that you are hosting the description, like, which could mean that you're the one who like can make changes to it, or create this sort of collaborative process of expanding the description of whatever it is, and so on. Like, so these are all, I think, interesting possibilities in and of themselves, which, once again, you probably can find a use case, especially if you dig to board games and other games, for each one of these examples given. But at the same time, like, thinking of them in this sort of combinatory fashion allows you to map these possibilities maybe with more oversight. And my general question here is still like looking at these possibilities, what one could do with these possibilities, and then I would like to bring a case, and one of my proposal cases would be XORG itself also, but we could think of all the case of the last couple of weeks, or just some other case to use as a way of playing. So we're kind of still in the prelude of mapping of what kind of things could we play with.
I like the idea of using XORG as a case.
Mm-hmm. One quality I would put on any case, but also XORG, is like playing around with this would not, like, I wouldn't make it like a session of like, here is the real definition, like, but to kind of free it up to what if it was this and what if it was that, to take some pressure off like putting things down, to not to be correct in this sense, but kind of more populate the space of possibilities, and because you can always choose something that you find interesting from there and kind of solidify that.
One thing I find interesting is like if you have a token that kind of represents something, then kind of what can you store inside that like token, and kind of what can you, for instance, keep track of or move to some other place in the interface or something like that. kind of with these tokens, or how could the tokens negotiate between each other by using the diagrams or the interfaces or so on, kind of as well.
Yeah, that's a huge topic, and an important topic. But like I said, like there's so many possibilities you can do with that, like whether it's stored in a token or activated by the token and stored in the board or representation itself. Just one practical example came to mind that is still kind of stolen from board games. Like in addition to this sort of process tracking, you also have like almost like a record tracking or mapping techniques, which is like, it's almost like a mapping legend. Like there is state X. I'm putting this sort of slots to these things. Like this could be on the side of the board, this thing, and it has multiple states, but then you like place a token to one to mark that, okay, now this state is on. Or maybe there's two tokens and its state is on more strongly, but then when it's removed, the state is off. And you could have, I think there are games that even use both, that you have like something that is moving in sequence, but you have another that is more configuring the state of the whole thing, for example. And like you suddenly place this token in this sort of, let's call it like a tracker, and everything in the board changes. Like it's like pressing a button essentially. So that comes to mind. But like in terms of the tokens, I mean, we shortly referred to this sort of vast possibility space last time, at the end of last time. But you can go into so many directions. Like, is the token consumed or not? Is it a token that just moves normally, that is like tracking your place, or is it something that when you place it somewhere, that means that something happens but the token disappears? Is the token copyable? Do you get more tokens from a certain place? What kind of variations there are those tokens, and on, of course. But it's certainly a possibility space to keep in mind.
Just a small follow-up comment, like what you mentioned just a while ago, like if I place my token somewhere in the diagram or the board or whatever, kind of to think of that as a kind of seed. I mean, in a way that you said that everything kind of in the board changes. Okay, like so this is in a way seed. Where it is located defines how you see things, and this is really interesting.
Yeah, can you expand? Like I thought I got it, but then I might have missed it. Like what you exactly meant, like the last couple of sentences. Can you expand on those?
Yeah, I like in some games as well, like if there are, let's say there are plenty of like enemies or some developments happening in the board, depending on where you or your team is kind of located in that board. Of course, it's the same as in chess, that changes how you look at the board and so on. But if you think of it as a kind of organizational structure or organization or something like that, like how could you, for instance, by placing your token or tokens, how could you generate new knowledge of the situation or of the space or something like that you are currently like viewing or something like that? How could you implement this sort of like generative elements here?
Yeah, that's an interesting direction, and I think could be something that would be good to take as a possibility. I can give like one example. Like, let's say we were playing now XORG, And there could be like things mapped that are like have a title but are mostly empty. Like let's say a description of something or a certain process and so on. Like one way to think about it is like if you move your token there, that might make you the host, which might kind of trigger a process of like one could be like, oh, you are now generating a description for this or whatever it is. Or you are actually now the host and you're like, when people are generating stuff for this, they send it to you and you kind of collate that or whatever. Like there's many possibilities. And that's it's of course just one example of that, but like but I do think like points out that how that direction can be interesting. One more thing I wanted to add, even though it's kind of expanding already large palette, but I think it's important, is that there is another board game technique which is very useful, which is kind of between tokens and board, and that would be the tiles. I drew a really bad representation here, but like this could be an example of a map of a board that is actually made out of tiles, and the tiles are like maybe one of the players' pieces that they received. They received like I'm continuing my bad drawing. This is going to be a lake, and here is a river of some kind, and the river continues to the lake, and then also here, and so on. So what's interesting here is like tiles are something that is like you can first of all think of them as a kind of in-between form between token and a board-like element, like something that is in the basis board setup, or something that is like a token, like your piece or representation of you buying something or whatever it is. Tile is both like a token and both like the basis, which is interesting in itself. And of course, the tiles can have their own rules, which is kind of the modularity of the board-like elements. Like here, this is why I was trying to badly draw this river and the lakes, is because like maybe your next placement here cannot be a river because there's no river continuing here. So this does not fit to this part. So you can have a logic that is really like a graph-like logic, but it's integrated into the tile, and its token-like placement is dependent on the logic that is in the board itself. So yeah, and it's a very, I think, an interesting form in it, like this sort of building something, let's say graph-like or map-like, but building it almost like from tokens themselves, or something that is token-like it. But just as a general, because I'm to try to usher in things to break my monologue, I want to ask you, like, are there things that you would like to make questions on, ask, or jump into, for example, jump into more like a case playtest, XORG, or take a particular topic like tokens or tiles or certain styles of graph that would be still good to discuss upon?
I would be ready to jump in game.
All right. Is this a common agreement? I'm egging comments from you now. I'm getting desperate enough to try to get you into the conversation and hook you in.
Nice try, Pekka. Nice try.
Always have to try.
Yes.
I'm in there also.
Yeah.
What did you say, Martin? I didn't hear.
I'm in for jumping.
All right. Jakub?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired today, but
It's okay.
yeah, playing is also good. Doing the game
All right. So
case.
I gotta go in a couple of minutes, but I have another session. But
that's okay. I think mirror boards are they essentially infinite, Jakub?
I think so.
Yeah. So let's not erase then.
And I mean, you can also like zoom in and out, so you can be nesting if it yes. So like the zooming can make it infinite.
Yeah.
Nesting also.
So the one thing we could do is essentially move to the right, because that could keep the kind of memento parts in the screen, that they are now on the left side of the screen, and just move to the empty space there, and use that as a basis. And of course, like, everyone is free to add, draw, but also put whatever elements, text, boxes, post-its, various other features, comments, everything is possible. So so the case of XORG, my proposal is first to kind of let's say collect stuff on the table, like what kind of pieces would be playing with. Like, of course, one could say one could take pieces like the OBOX system, and then pieces underneath that, the different structures in it, or the artwork. But one could also take like general areas. One could take processes, and processes that have or do exist or have been visited, or processes that could be visited. But we collect a bit of those. We don't have to collect all, because it just delays a bit on the game start, but some pieces that people would like to start with. And now I will say that then you will have to provide the pieces, because that allows me to shut up even more.
Okay, I will start. I'm suggesting that we have a very restricted and limited play area that we can kind of express by drawing a board. I'm sorry, drawing a box or frames that we can at least almost like see here if you would draw it. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah. All right, this is the first move then, because we're treating suggestions as moves. And we can also set the rule of that we cannot really go back, but we can always modify. It's like if somebody says, well, I want a larger frame, that's the next, that's a move in itself, but you cannot like erase a move. All right, so Mikael has made a move. What about others? Like, the move can be now adding a topic, or like adding a structural approach, really anything at this point. We can limit the set of moves later.
Okay, I'll suggest that how about there's the frame, there's the box that I would like to see who is there. I'd like to meet my fellow players and see with whom I can communicate. So basically, I'm saying that those who are inside, then I can start to talk with them. All
right, so everybody has to come inside. I'm now interpreting a move in order to talk. And then they have to choose how they come inside. So yeah, okay. I'm using a pen, so I don't know if I'm visible or not, but I am inside. But I could also come in as, let's put it like this. P is me, and I'm putting F like facilitator, and this is now a role. So I'm making, let's say, a circle for the role. I'm trying to keep the thing simple because it's a small frame. So I came in as one of my roles is facilitator, but then I put also P, which is a player. So this is how I'm in. Somebody came in with a cool hat. Who is that? And somebody came in as a line, and somebody came in as a text. Can you describe your choices? This is still me, like trying to get you talk.
I think Mikael wrote my name.
Oh.
He came in as me.
No, I didn't, but I wish I would.
Yes.
So who came with the hat? Which is now
hat is gone. Hat is gone.
It is, yeah. It got overlaid with the thing there.
And Mikael came in as lines. Moves are constantly available. Like SNTL, of course, are doing moves already, but you could say like lines work this way, for example, from Mikael, or the hat, or the 3D glasses face works this way.
I think lines are Martin's. This MB is probably Martin's.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I kind of looked at the wrong moment. Your cursor was somewhere there. Yes. So Martin, what are you? What is the move you're making?
He's a labyrinth.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm really able to say that or rationalize. I think I found it really interesting, this attention vector that you put two forms earlier, or like, you know, what happens if it's a line and what happens if it's nested. And yeah, I thought I'd just try out as what I can appear, and we can take that apart at some point. It has many parts, and so we can take it apart. I think that was a bit the idea.
No, I mean, it could be also the whole thing. Like maybe your role is to be, say, a labyrinth or a map.
I think, if anything, the role is like to be many parts.
But for example, that kind of brought to my mind your labyrinth is like, in a way, like if you interact with the person in a, say, a digital platform, it is actually a kind of a labyrinth. It's like a sequence. Like first you write hello, and then you can send an image, and like after you add an image, you have a new chat which is under the image, and so on. Like that's like walking in a labyrinth. But at the same time,
I gotta go. Sorry.
All right.
Bye.
See you. So in a way, like making a labyrinth can also be an interesting way of approaching this question of like, what is a person? Maybe the person can be a labyrinth because they kind of are.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I need to also jump to another call at 5, so I will watch afterwards. But thanks.
Yeah. Now that we got, too bad that you have to leave. Now that we've got.
Yeah, I'm already feeling the FOMO now. So we're finally playing. It's like I'm missing it. Then I'll see whether I can jump back still in time, but I doubt it. But anyways, I will play on the offline. So see.
I will make a move to, which is a cheating move, because I will place it outside the board, which is I will put role as a labyrinth as a comment on the side. Because one could think of like, okay, like there can be as many roles as one really wants on a particular person. So what if the like a one option or even a requirement for member, one calls it, of an XORG or XORG would be to have the labyrinth version of their role.
One interesting thing, that labyrinth reminds me of it's kind of you cannot turn left or right. It's you are going deeper and deeper into something, and it's like ritualistic and kind of meditative as it is, because it's really like leading you somewhere, and you also know how to get back from there, so you can trace where you came, because there is only one path. So in that sense, it's a little like Ariadne's thread, for instance. You are rolling this this thread, opening and rolling back in, kind of. So it's also a way to kind of navigate.
Yeah, and actually that introduces another important topic, which is taking from our earlier topics, is captures or saves. So a practical example here is that you could say that anyone who travels through the labyrinth that Martin has created leaves a tracing of, and that in itself becomes like a tracing of the process. But then another trip could be its own tracing in an, and create a kind of like a alternate process for it. But if I ask you, Martin, if you are a labyrinth, what kind of labyrinth could you be? You don't have to explain it fully, but like whatever impressions come to your mind from it. So this is a move making you a question, which kind of pushes you to make a description for it. Of course, others can make questions as well.
So I don't know if I'm a labyrinth. It's you who said that I was.
So, you can dispute that, yes.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting with being a labyrinth. This I think what I thought was that I was multiple parts. That was the thing. Like, and now I put the frames there, so like also this kind of I mean, in a sense, you can maybe put it a bit like one would be a labyrinth, but like a bit of a multidimensional one, right? I mean, not one that one, would walk in and then a path of some sort would follow, but like that one, the quest of finding the way would kind of change shape in some sense, like suddenly it's not a question of kind of choosing the right way to turn, but it's like picking up right object also, but I'm not sure if this is getting very meta right now. But I thought there was something when you said like come in, and I thought there was something about kind of many pieces. That's the best I know.
So inspired by that, I started to draft out the kind of a badly drawn labyrinthine structure. Is like, so there is a queue, and then there's a line that leads to A, that is an answer, or another line to question 2, which could be like, there's always an entrance in my person that of a question, and you can additionally choose whether you go from question to another question or question to an answer. So this is an access point in itself. And this is also me trying to figure out the possibility of a labyrinth as a role.
One addition that I find very interesting in labyrinths and many other type of structures, similar type of structures, is that of course they can kind of guide you, but or force you, but at the same time they can host you, or they can kind of host whatever it is you are carrying, or whatever it is you are looking for, and so on.
Can you go deeper on this difference between host and carry?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think hosting might carry is something that you would be doing, but it's your perspective. But then again, hosting is the perspective of the dungeon or the labyrinth, maybe.
Yeah.
But in a way, they both can exist at the same time. So for you, you are interested in carrying, let's say, the question that burdens you or that you want to solve, and at the same time, the labyrinth can also have its own purpose while hosting you, and kind of in a way also be kind of negotiating with whatever it is that you are carrying, or something like that.
Yeah, I agree that like that's an interesting direction in itself. Like, in a way, like there is a way that they kind of also combine, which is like, let's put it this way: like somebody is hosting an environment, and then a player comes in, and the player is sort of carrying, or maybe I'm getting your thoughts wrong, but in a way, like also the player is hosting themselves. Like you can be hosting a context like yourself, and still being kind of carrying something in another hosted context. Does that make sense, or am I going somewhere else?
I think that might be making sense, and in a sense, you can be the host for both the labyrinth and whatever it is you are carrying, or it may be a kind of a social construction as well. Kind of, you need at least one other people to agree with you in order to be able to move in the dungeon or the labyrinth. So in a sense, there might be some sort of like payment for running and hosting, which might be, for instance, that the party or the other people wandering in in the labyrinth need to have something in common with you. I mean, they need to be agreeing with you about the nature of the labyrinth or whatever it is you are carrying or whatever it is your role is or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, this is no, I think there is something like rather useful in this whole thought, like so in a way, like one kind of dives into this hosting carrying, like when it's when you're kind of holding a context environment almost, then it becomes hosting. Of course, environment here could be like a process environment or a place, or and then like a thing that is hosted, like yourself, which is a kind of environment of its own. Maybe you are the only one in that environment, but you're in different places or utilizing different moves and so on. Can be still a carry in another environment, like the character taken into a dungeon is an example of this. Like and then somebody or somebody's can be the host of that dungeon. It's also possible to kind of have this sort of multiplicities, like you know, the hosting is divided in a way, like it's an environment, but somebody's hosting the descriptions and somebody's hosting the I don't know, the creatures, whatever it is, like that you can have like a collaboration on the hosting as well.
Yeah, and that is interesting. Like whatever roles we take, if we have at least like two kind of shared roles, and that we basically, in some sense, like we agree on that, okay, I have this role and you have that role, then that means that the whole kind of instance becomes shared already, because we have this like we are sharing and distributing work based on some mutual like understanding, and then yeah, it's like it's very interesting, and kind of and you or your roles or the or whatever it is you are carrying or so on kind of always has the kind of potential to become a seed, kind of that generates something that has never been seen before in the labyrinth or in the dungeon, and the labyrinth may change, or your idea on the labyrinth may change, or so on.
Yeah, like so let's we could try to turn this into a case. Like, of course, there could be easy choices. One could say that these sessions are hosted in a way. Like, for example, you could say that at least I'm partaking in the hosting of this session, which is a context. But that's a kind of an easy choice. But you could also say, like, somebody draws a map and hosts that map, and that now becomes part of XORG in itself. Like, it behaves like kind of like a role, like that they, by being a host, there are openings that it offers some possibilities to participate in it. Like maybe it's just a draft of a map, and it becomes its own kind of pocket universe in a way. Like so it's really similar to like making a new game, but the game is now also hosted in the larger XORG in a way. Like the larger XORG hosts that game, and then somebody particularly hosts the kind of playing of that game. So like the frame of that game in itself, like So it's a little bit like the nested structures. So let's say there was a right of bringing whatever creation into XORG, however drafty or non-drafty, and hosting it. That there would be always this recognition of hosting it, which can set practical points like contact points, etc. But can also be like who's running it, essentially, kind of things as well. And I think it's an interesting pathway to think like how to structure creations potentially in XORG is this sort of like that you bring something and say, I'm hosting this, which can be any frame. Like it could be a whole system, it could be a particular move, it could be like I made this move and I'm now hosting it. And others could say, hey, that's interesting. What about adding this and this? And you answer because you're hosting it and so on. I think there's something interesting in that direction.
Yeah, I definitely like the way kind of in combination with this mirror board type of thing and things like that, like leaving also traces of the processes and kind of leaving them waiting for a new like input of some sort and so on. It's really, and it's kind of it's really interesting to think that this kind of like growing cloud of hosted instances of multiple like ideas and elements and so on.
And in like in an experimental way, it's already sort of in effect, like one could say Jakub, who is still doing this, probably in the other meeting, this graphical representation in the lower left corner, he's in a way hosting it. And like there is a possibility then that the host can like set rules. Like maybe the starting point is not no access, but maybe it's all access. So in the case of Jakub, I will draw let's say a representation of a coin here or sun. So I'm like, because he hasn't set rules, so I did that. But maybe the rules could be that you can make a move here, but it has to be, I don't know, text or drawing, just to make examples. And the host can do that, and then therefore that starts to define itself more.
I'm sorry, Martin, you were about to say something. Or okay, just something came to my mind from some online type of games, like which is very close what you Pekko said. Like, okay, now if I open a new instance, for the sake of clarity, let's think that it's this. It's a new Miro board that is practically unlimited in its size. So so I'm granted all the kind of admin rights to that page. But then again, if I could say, hey, either that okay, this is open for everyone for editing, but if we could also like select from a list of like structures, like okay, now we are using a grid-like structure, and this grid here, I give the hosting rights permanently or some other way, to you. Okay, so and have some sort of like relations between these grids or larger or smaller like areas, like in a way that it would also be kind of meaningful for the larger research or structure or so on.
Yeah, let's think about big. Yes, I think there's quite a lot in that what you're pointing out. So if I walk through it, like thinking through what you said, like okay, so it's possible to bring any structure and kind of like in a way frame it. Say you as your host. Of course, you could also propose or offer somebody else to host it, or host some part of it, like a certain nature of it, or whatever it is. But then the hosted context can, let's start with the offer, can offer to another context relation. So let's say there's, okay, I'm using Jakob's as an example because he hasn't set the rule. I can use his hosted context of this game-like map he's making. Like he could, or some who is the host could offer that yes, you can bring in a character here, but it has to be a character and you have to place it on the map. Like these would be rules. But it could offer, say, to my very simple labyrinth, which is like has this purple token that anybody can pick. This I should write somewhere, and that you can move that token to by making a question to either the other question to or answer. So you can always take the token. So you can and with the question you can get another question based on your question or an answer. So what Jakob would offer that whoever reaches in his hosted context, let's say this platform, this white platform here, can come in and I mean, everybody can make a question, but maybe they can make a particular question. And they would offer it to my context, my simple labyrinth. And if I would say yes, now this relation would exist. Like if you moved in this Jakob's game here, you get this special question, and then that can lead to making a question in my hosted context. And then this relation exists. And like, I know it's not the best example, a little bit awkward, but using what we have. Or like Jakob could offer from whoever reaches this platform that they can enter into Martin's rather expanded board in itself as a freely defined presence. And then if Martin as a host would accept that, then this would be true. Like, yeah. Is that the kind of direction you're thinking?
Most definitely, yes. And just like really ways to create this sort of like relations. And one thing I remembered from the anomaly mining playtest as well was kind of okay, if you would have kind of roles that apply for the whole document, then let's say Jakob's role would be terraformer, and so we in our initial scene we would decide that we want to create some land on the upper left corner of the board. So so it might be that okay, this falls into Jakob's territory because he's got the role of the kind of terraformer, and it's kind of applying for the whole board, but I could also like or we could also decide to okay, this role here applies for only the let's say upper right corner of the of the board. Otherwise, you are holding these roles, but in this area, you are holding these roles, and it's kind of interesting, kind of these like locational structures.
Yeah, which kind of brings in nicely a move type, which we could simply call the framing, which is like you can always frame. And it, like you were saying, okay, Jakub has this role of the terraformer, what's the word? And then you create a frame that is a certain area, but it also could be, you know, like a certain paragraph in a text or even a sentence, like in a larger document. And you offer, because offer works as a general relation, because you cannot really force it, but it's like, let's say you offer to Jakub the role of a terraformer to that area or that paragraph in the text, and then Jakub accepts it, and therefore there is a terraforming process towards that area or text now existing.
Yes, this is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is pointing out how the kind of approaches we're working on, what is the kind of benefit from that generality. It's like now when we think through the role, we're not thinking just, you know, like a player in a traditional sense. Like the role can be just as well as what we would conventionally think of as a player, or it can be something like more like a host or a GM, or really anything else. It can be an editor as well, like in more traditional organizational sense. But then it can mix and match. It can be a terraformer, which is actually accepting a kind of a task of terraforming, which is almost like editing, but in a playful sense.
And this is so cool in this like Miroboard context, because I've always in this playtests wanted to say that okay, but then you get to change your avatar if you want when you enter this other role that is offered to you. Okay, now in this area here, Jakub becomes terraformer, and therefore he may also select his terraforming outfit.
Yes, like, and that is really like a role. Like if the roles are, like I think that they are almost like these gloves that we put on. Like our hand is in the glove, but then the glove sets like aspects to it. Like, and the roles can always be in the scope. Like here, he has this sort of way of like getting in is to put on the glove. This is a little bit like, you know, this hygiene surgeries where there's this box, that's the scope, and then the surgeons put their like through this sort of plastic wall, like which has this glove parts, and they enter that space in that role in a way. Like it's similar to that. But I think like so all of this is actually like what's kind of underneath here is a really interesting general structure. Like in like it has a lot of flexibility in it. It's like, because like I said, the context could be, you know, like the board like graphical thing in a mirror board, or it could be simply inside of it a link to a text or something else, and like then that offers this possibility of hosting. And of course, this can apply in other contexts. So let's say the text is Google Doc, to keep it simple. And when you go to the Google Doc, there might be highlights or comments on the side, which is saying like highlighting a paragraph and like pointing Jakub terraformer, which is doing the same thing in that context.
And this is really interesting. One thing from the mega dungeon perspective as well, like what you said about offering the role of a terraformer in this and this area, for instance, for Jakub, that would actually also mean that the entrance is very close to an offer as well. So we're also like offering an entrance to that area, and then you can offer, like you can offer the role of terraformer for a specific person, for instance, but you can also offer a role of a let's say playtester or visitor or something like that.
Yeah, like the one thing about the offer is that, and we talked about this with, I mean, you haven't met Fabian, but like I talked just recently about this topic with Fabian, is that everything that we consider as a door, we use the concept of portal, kind of like to have the most generic concept of door-like thing. But everything that you associate with port happens in an offer. Like, or offer kind of can subsume all those qualities, like, because like but it can also add this you know, like like the ways to open the door, like the conditions, and it sets this this quality of like you have the option to enter it, but enter it in this and this fashion, or you have the option to enter it if you bring in this and this. Like, not that you have to use all those features, but they are there. So like, I think it's completely possible to think things like doors and ports, like in the full capability of what doors and ports can be, in this kind of approach that we are talking about.
This is very interesting, like in the sense of like doors also being a kind of, or gates being a gatekeepers, in the sense that if it's an offer or something like that, you could like also say to the gate that, hey, when someone kind of exits from here, comes back, okay, what can you bring with you, or what is the state where you will leave the area when you leave, if you are a terraformer or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, and you can even, I mean, this goes deep into this topic, but I think it's good to highlight that possibility. Like, let's say that offer is like, you can enter this if you create this kind of output, and that's the offer. So and the output could be really taking out something from the area, but it could also be like you generate something from the area, and now you're kind of even conditioning that in, that they have to come out with certain output. That's kind of like the condition of them coming in. But of course, you could say it just as well, like you may enter with this output, and then it's like optional, like you don't have to, but you can. So you can play around a lot with that. That it's kind of like suggesting generation just as well as suggesting retrieval. Like it can be like, you can come in if you bring this thing out, but it can also be you can come in if you actually create something from the area itself, something that doesn't exist there already.
Yeah, that's kind of leads into inevitable meta talk about like offering offers, or kind of gates or doors to doors, or ports to ports, or so on. It's just like very 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 interesting in the kind of ways as well, how to hack them, or how to kind of bundle the possibly interesting types of how to implement kind of this sort of like offers or doors or something like that.
Yeah, and I think, like, I mean, the possibility range is huge, but like, one can also, like, what if one thinks about this towards how to kind of simplify it into something that is structurally easy to pursue as kind of a first step, like if one thinks, okay, if XORG could have this kind of structures, what would be a simple way to get towards that? I can think of course, like making a, like, this is super boring and practical, but making a mirror board that has some representation of things in XORG, existing ones or new ones, and then using this sort of frames to mark hosting, and this would be not like the only representation of XORG in itself, but it would be a representation. Because the more I think about it, it's about like variety of representations is often a very useful thing in itself.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting possibilities, like only not like sketching structures and things like that, but also like making them in a way that become very easy to edit as well, or change later on, or so on. If there are these sort of like structures, they become like modular in a sense.
Yeah, there is, like, I'm thinking this in simple moves, like anything can be framed, any frame can be hosted. I'm writing this down. This is how it works. Okay. Host can set rules, make buffers from set rules upon a frame. This is how I from slash. I'm kind of thinking this through while I'm writing, so this is not the most inspiring text, but I think you probably see where this is thinking. So
the kind of possibilities from for like the possibilities for expression, they come from the kind of toolbox of the mirror board. So in a sense, like or how I see it, what you are writing is like because inside a frame there can be another frame and so
yes.
on. So you don't need that many rules in a way. They're you can copy them into another context.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so as well. Like I mean, not that those are the rules, but I was kind of like working through the logic essentially, like, and how to like see the kind of minimal version of it. Like anything can be framed, any frame can be hosted, and host can set rules upon the frame and make offers from within the frame. Let's put like, is it like if we think that even a member, whatever it's called, is a frame, then it could be from frame. What happened? I'll just go back. just had a. I lost the map and I don't know what happened. To think about. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I had a glitch on the. But yeah, so I now have advertisements. But yeah, so any make offers within the frame to another frame. That was the thing I wanted to edit. But yeah, like otherwise, I think the rules can stay. Okay, I'll just don't care about the technical difficulties. Apparently, it's locking my text from myself because I came in again. And like, oh, that's because I'm here. All right, that was the thing.
But it's like to me it like feels like really like with this like very little like edits and kind of new features. It can start like start to host for instance the OBOK structure and so on.
Yes, and everything else, like if somebody makes a weird board game or other interaction. But also, like, if it can, and I think it should, expand beyond the mirror. And what I mean by that, like, if it's like you have a Google Doc, like, you can kind of replicate similar functionalities by, say, highlighting a text or marking it somehow to another person. And this can make the particular passage in the text to be hosted, and then set like an offer from there, like the same structures essentially, like which I think is interesting as a way of thinking textual collaboration as well. That that like the text could be here on the mirror board. There could be a frame upon it. On a frame could be a comment or whatever, like that could define the hosts maybe better if one needs more detail. But then inside the text, there could be like its own notation of continuing the same practice. Okay, let's we could summarize a bit. But before that, Martin, do you still hear us? I can still see you doing things. But I wanted to get your comments on this direction. We've been bouncing around here. Like, how does it sound to you?
You mean the frame hosting?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an approach to yeah, I don't know like how much to say really about it. I think it is like if I get it well, I think it is quite clear. It's like what I understand this to kind of bring would then be that what would you say it would kind of I don't want to say like what it would be good for, but like it would kind of allow to do what?
So in essence, it's I think it's way to perceive and create structure in a creative manner. Like, let's take it through practical examples. Like now there is, say, the text of OBOK, and because it's following the conventional paths, like, you know, it's a Google Doc, and we don't have an interaction structure of its own for that. So it's just like there in the sense like, okay, anyone can edit or comment, but that's fairly vague in itself. But if there is a structure that, let's say, like to walk you through a practical thing, like let's say I start as a host of the OBOK as a document, but I could also invite others by offering them to be hosts to it. But I could also say, like, there is a certain passage, and I could mark that passage and offer it for somebody else, even to a certain role. Like, let's say, I mean, we use this example of Jakub as a terraformer, but let's make a clearer example. Like somebody is has taken the role amongst its many roles of an impressionist. And the impressionist is the one who looks at things or perceives things, whatever they are, and is makes impressions of it. Like, this reminds me of this, or like could be kind of vague impression. So what if I mark a passage of OBOK and offer, say you are an impressionist, offer to your impressionist role this particular paragraph, which then of course could mean that you create impressions for it. So it's kind of creating this structure that can make these kind of interactions perceivable. And the same is true of, like, doesn't have to be text. It could be like, say, your graphical map. Like if you're now hosting it and you set like an entrance to it, which is really an offer, but one can think of it as an entrance, is you can come here and place your piece if you explain what it means that you're standing in that position. Well, that's an offer. And then like that creates an interaction to it. And that can be a way to, you know, develop the structure further, etc.
Right. Yeah. So it's a bit kind of it's a bit like a prism in a way, right? Like, so you it's a kind of to granulate roles and ways of interacting.
Yeah, granulate, but also explicate.
Yes.
And,
yeah, that's what I mean by maybe
granulate. Like to be able to make them. Like, for example, now, like even thinking of this impressionist, it's very much like roles as hats, which is of course a possibility in there, but we don't currently have that in XORG in, let's say, in conventional use. We are kind of vaguely as members, like equal rights and all that, but like it's fairly vague. But like what opens this, like that, let's say I now write this role of impressionist, and let's say, because it's the role is, I put it I host it, but I put it for free use. So somebody else, say you pick it up, like I take the impressionist, then I make my own version, you change something in it, and you have now this sort of impressionist version Martin. And that's now one of your roles. It's not your only role in XORG. It doesn't take anything away. It doesn't have, you don't have to squeeze into it, but it's rather like, now I have almost like this coat as well, or this hat as well. And now that you have this sort of impressionist version Martin, like it's a place where somebody can make an offer to it. Like let's say like I'm creating a game structure or an image or whatever, and I suddenly think like, wait a minute, it would be interesting to hear impressions on it, and I make you an offer, which then allows you to think about how you approach it playfully through this sort of impressionistic, and it allows to think about the relation between that thing and you processing it playfully as well.
What I also find very interesting is that on top of all this, because you have to find the space in the canvas for what you are trying to express. You also have to think about the relationships, for instance. Where will I put this and what sort of relation will I kind of write and draw to it? Like, will I put it farther away, like for some reason, or closer to this this other function, or so on. So it's also like it seems to me that it's also able to in this like in its interface, it's also able to create some extra layers of meaning if needed.
Yeah, that is a whole nother direction of playing with distances relations. There's a couple of ways, like, or probably many ways, but one is the kind of practical one, which is that you use it to have the space to be able to express relations, like, you know, like lines and so on, like but I think you could also use it as like a mapping an area, like in a normal map. Going a little bit back to the type of analysis I made in the beginning, is like the distance really works like how we understand distance. It might be travel distance. It's harder to get further and so on. It takes time and effort. But of course, it could be something else as well. Like and it also does something that is like almost like soft categorizing. Like, you know, like these things that are close to each other are more closely associated than these other things, which is more like the diagrammatic approach to things and conceptual mapping kind of approach to things. So we could use that as well, like that if you create a new thing and you think it's closer to these and that things, you try to place it closer to them. Maybe that's actually good direction to pursue, perhaps. But I think, yeah, all of those are possible.
And it's really interesting that the same way as when you kind of start a new work or create a new kind of document, you can also like decide these like preferences, how you want to start proceed or so on, maybe.
Yeah.
I just wanted
to say.
I just wanted to say, I don't know if you, I don't think, Pekko, you see it on your screen. I have it somehow on my screen. A thing that I find kind of very intriguing. I don't know if you can open a sidebar on the left side. Can you find a sidebar in your interface? Yeah. Try clicking on the bottom left, that thing.
Oh, no? Yes.
Hang on, and click on the frames on the leftist one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you can see the frames.
Okay. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like now it's funny because you pull the frames and you get very different kind of scenes, kind of you know, retrograded. Like there's a lot of kind of landscaping kind of happening first, and then you can kind of what was framed, you can completely, you know, reframe, to use the very obvious word. I think that's a
yeah, and it also works like a map because when you click on them, it zooms. It just pans the map to that area and also zooms closer. Now that the floating coin, and it's there. If I click here, it's like this is actually very useful.
I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, like
also it's kind of it reads like a comic strip in a way. Like it reads like it's a narrativation kind of. Feels like.
Definitely. Like this. This is an interesting addition. Like. And then you have the comments mode. You can.
What's that then?
You get there is this function comments, which is the bubble, speech bubble. I think in the comments you can. So you can actually similarly move between the comments. It opens them, but also zooms in on the comment where it is.
Yeah, right.
So
this is really interesting.
Yeah, this is also interesting. Like and I think this, let me actually, inspired by that, like, I'll make frame of the, and can one name these frames?
I'm sure one can double click. So.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. And I'll just this. This is like so. I think it would be interesting to play a game like following some of these structures, like for whether it's a next session or whatever it is, but to take this like more structured way of like bringing a bit in, like let's say bringing things like Bobok in, which it would be the link to it, and then you would have like maybe some definitions to it. But you could also bring in, like you could have an area for the roles, and I think it's possible to also maybe show somehow association that a person could mark, like even on the comment, like themselves having that role, or we can see that. But like this could allow for this sort of, for example, just creating like these different roles one could take inside XORG would be interesting. Like I think you could do a lot with, say, I don't know, the impressionist is one, like the terraformer is another, but you could really be highly creative with that kind of approach.
This is very interesting. Like I would be up to try to kind of map a sort of like organization or something similar with this, and also like of course either like at the same time or after that, like trying to implement some sort of like very simple process going on. I mean, for instance, just a very basic way of tokens flowing, or with the possibility of like one or two like other moves inside the game, and the possible like offer structures or something like that. So this might even like be for me, it seems that it could even be there could be material for a few different like sessions, but it would be very cool to try out one.
Yeah, I agree. Like because like the different areas, I started to play around. No, I did the wrong thing. And like I started to play around with the roles. I had the way to, yes, this is the way of like. I mean, this could be written much better, but I'm just playing around with this. Like, so in a way, like you could pick roles, and this is probably not the best way to do that. But this direction, I think, is I'm putting an example. So yeah, this kind of direction in this whole structure is an interesting possibility as well. And you could put like but more traditional ones like editing or facilitating or whatever, and then much more unusual ones and mix them. I think it's definitely worth exploring as a way to turn the structure into or open more playfulness. I don't think it's an enforced structure. Like I don't think everything has to happen through it. Like everything is really like an option or possibility. But as a way to like in a way there is this creativity that say I now created the impressionist and suddenly it can exist in the organization and nobody's holding it. It's like floating, like utilizing this floating idea we had earlier. Like it's floating like in the air, but anybody can pick it for themselves or even for a moment, or something that they hold in the structure itself. Yeah,
I think this is very interesting because this is also something where you can get lots better or kind of better to suit the needs of let's say OBOK structure or something like that, in a way like working with let's say mirror board and really like also I find it like when you are starting to use this sort of like mirror boards and stuff like that tools, then first you are many times you are very expressive. You want to play out with everything. You want to create something out of it and put it where you can see and everybody can see it and so on. But during the time when the time passes, it's also possible that you start to like develop a more like minimalistic way of expression. Okay, okay, this square goes there to mark this and this sort of like behavior and so on. But at the same time, there would still be the place for expression and that sort of like creativity, like drawing and stuff like that. But like you would kind of find the correct use cases and so on. And in that sense, it would be very nice to see as well kind of how we as a kind of collaborative body will learn and how we can develop a kind of collective or mutual language where we can both like express in our own creative way and at the same time place this like basic structures so that that we will all immediately like intuitively understand them and so on. So this is very interesting, very cool area to kind of play with.
Yeah, I think one practical thing is like I found actually going through Miro board and like it constantly offers you these templates, but like there's a way just open it without the template. Like you almost, I think you have to click twice or something. And this is the Miro board without the templates, and I find it much better because the templates are actually kind of limiting you or pushing you to certain uses. But while this gives you less in the beginning, I guess it's about fastness of working or whatever, it actually is most flexible form of the Miro board I've seen, like compared to the kind of templates I used. So that's one thing. Like, and I think like so there is a way. I know Jakub has done it. I don't know quite, but you can copy from a board an area to another board. So this can open up the space that people could play with their own Miro boards, or not that they have to, but to kind of play with the structure. Of course, they can play with this, like there is editing rights to this, and I can post the links. But like even if one creates like something in their own Miro board, you can still even bring it into some other common board. So that's a possibility as well.
I was just reminded I need to leave in a minute or two. So
yeah, I was trying to bring this to an end because like it's been already, I think, up to the time of decency in terms of time frames. But I think there is something like in the structure that is now floating about here, and which is really based on the same like analyzing is based on the same concept basis. But they're going to point out that this sort of creativity, I think like the possibility of creating roles and creating this sort of context to host for XORG is a really interesting expansion and a kind of way of creating a kind of graphical dungeon in a way that can be mined to new directions to as a kind of as an extension of XORG in itself. And it allows to play around with this like different functionalities in itself, like maybe you have even another project somewhere else, but you ask for an impressionist to somebody in an impressionist role to comment upon it and things like this. So it can also bleed over. So yeah, like I would propose that maybe like taking a little bit of system out here, and then I think that's an option, whether that's next week or, but I think should be soon, of exploring that as an expansion of XORG. Yeah, and trying to create that kind of a entrance hall plus extensions of that expansion into XORG itself.
sounds great. Yeah.
So we found another way into a dungeon, which is not a bad thing at all. It's a very interesting structure, and I think like thinking of this both as a diagram and a dungeon and a gaming board, all of those things I think is actually useful. But any last comments?
Looking forward to the next session.
Likewise, Martin.
Very much so.
Yeah, I'll think about it. I'll post this link to Miro board anyway for free. Like, I mean, you have it, but I'll post it into the Telegram group if it's lost, and we can go from there. And I'll think about this in general, and I think many people will. But let's go from there. Oh, I've been off camera, but I think that's okay. I'll stop the recording.